Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you had a great Christmas and a Happy New Year. Today I would like to take you with me to an exquisite exhibition in Paris that is dedicated to one of the greatest Swedish painters of wildlife, Bruno Liljefors. Bruno Liljefors stayed in France for a while, in Grèce-sur-Loing, together with different other Swedish painters at that time. But these are nearly all the paintings. Well, I'm lying. There are maybe 2 or 3 more in this exhibition that actually were produced by the painter in France. So he was not as inspired by the landscape and the nature in France. He learned the techniques of what was going on in France. He came in contact with the Impressionists and especially the school of Barbizon that I've mentioned in my previous video about Théodore Rousseau. I will link it down below. But he actually really longed for Sweden and he couldn't wait to go back to Sweden and apply what he has learned in France to the landscapes that he was used to, the landscapes of his native land. You see, this is what I was talking about. This is another example of a painting that was created in France. So it's such... How should I put it politely? No, I cannot put it politely. This is a much more boring scene compared to what he did back in Sweden. It is not only due to the landscape that is much more flat in central France where this was painted, but also to the light conditions. Of course, further up north there is something very particular about how the sunlight falls and what colors it gives, which you cannot reproduce exactly like that in central France. So obviously it is also impacting his style, his quality and the subject. So in comparison, for instance, this is the colors that you get in a Swedish sunset, or more in a sunset up north in Sweden. And to be clear, I am of course not only talking about the colors in the sunset, okay? I get it that wherever you are, sunset might be a colorful event. That's not the point. We have a more classical composition with the subject being placed in the middle. What I absolutely love about his representation of the fox are 2 things. So first of all, as you can see, the fox is depicted within his natural habitat, so you have quite a lot of context going on, not only the animal in itself, but quite a lot of detail in the plants and the grasses. You learn as much about the habits and the nature of the animal as you learn about his surroundings. And secondly, I absolutely love the contrast in the techniques between his representing the animal and the surroundings. You might, and I hope that the camera is able to pick it up, as you might see, there are a few layers that he used in order to paint the fox. For instance, if you take the cub, you can basically see the grasses through the fur. So it is painted in a very thin layer of paint, as opposed to the very textured way in that he painted the flowers, for instance, or even single grasses. You can make out quite a lot of relief. And what is interesting is that it doesn't mean that the fox is being painted in a less realistic way than the grasses, because he created texture and this photorealism through a variation of colors that is very much present in the fur versus creating texture through texture in the grasses, in the flowers, and everything that has to do with the surroundings of the fox. And I feel like this brings even more to the attention of the viewer how very delicate and fluffy the fur is. Another thing that one might mention here is that this is a very interesting representation or a very interesting context for the fox, because contrary to how animals were painted before, in a neutral context, just maybe in a way of painting portraits of animals, here we have them in their actual everyday life, hunting, playing around, something that is extremely realistic and extremely intimate also to the animal. Of course, the fact that Bruno Liljefors was a great hunter from his early days on helped him following the traces of animals really easily without being intrusive. As you can see, he applied this technique not only to the paintings of animals, like the one with the fox, but also to portraits. So here we have the artist's wife, and you can already see how, well, not in the same way textured, but how unfinished somehow the background is and how textured it appears. So we don't have the very loaded, heavy brush strokes, as you can see. On the contrary, it's quite transparent here. So it's less textured in a way, okay, than the previous painting, but there is still a contrast between how smooth and how luminous the subject looks versus the very textured background. I love this effect, how it looks and how it draws your attention to the subject in a quite non-obvious way. This definitely is one of my absolute favorite paintings from the exhibition. Well, I love foxes, so I'm biased, I admit. But we still have the same technique effect that I was talking about. So the very detailed and textured background versus the very fluffy, very smooth effect in the fur. But I also absolutely love the colors. You have the contrast between the very warm colors of the fox, the very cool green that he was going for here, and also the red in the leaves in the foreground, and the way that it is scattered all over creates such a beautiful, beautiful balance within the painting. I'm absolutely in love with this. Also, look how unconventional the composition is. It is so rare to see that a subject, a central subject, would be not only close to one of the borders of the painting, but would even not be completely represented because it's half outside of it, right? And still, through this diagonal created through the fox's tail, it stays so balanced. It doesn't shock you in any form or way that you do not see the whole of the fox here. Also, to counterbalance this, we have the two little birds as well, and by the way, surprise, surprise, if I zoom in, you have also the tail of the little bird that is not completely in the painting. This is such a modern way of doing art. I'm in love. Also, can we please look at this textured bark here? It is stunning. It is absolutely stunning. The fur is absolutely stunning. You have so many different iterations of color here without having 100,000 of precise brush strokes that make up the fur that you would more classically see in realist paintings of this sort. I absolutely love the fact that he didn't go down that road. Okay, there are quite a few artworks of this sort here. This has a name. I cannot for the life of me remember it, but it is a format apparently frequently used in Japanese art where you would arrange in a non-symmetric way different types of smaller paintings or smaller artworks that do not necessarily have a lot of things in common or are not part of the same scene maybe, but make out one whole artwork. And this is exactly what we're having here. I think it's very interesting, but I do feel like we are closer to something of a more decorative value here than, you know, other artworks by Liljefors. This is another example of this apparently typical Japanese way of arranging the different artworks. Another example of the same type of artwork, but what I wanted to show you here is the particular way in which the cat is represented, because a cat classically at this point is represented more like a domestic animal, like a pet, right? So being cutesy, sitting on your lap or in the corner of a painting representing the interior. But Bruno Liljefors opted for a more true, a more naturalistic representation of the cat that is a great hunter. So you can see it showing its teeth and trying to catch the bird. Here it has caught the bird and has it in its mouth, so it might be more natural maybe for us to see these kind of images, but at the end of the 19th century this was not at all the case. This was not mainstream art for them, and this was not the type of representation of the cat that they were used to. So these are aspects that made his artwork very different and very difficult to understand also for art critics of his time. The Japanese influence is of course very strong here as well. You have a nearly monochromatic painting on the right where everything is grey and black and white, with only some points of interest through the red of the bullfinches. And then we have, of course, this a bit eccentric composition where the subject would not be in the middle or in the third of a painting like we used to in our Western art, but a bit off center and a bit off balance. Art critics debated whether this was based on a photograph rather than painted in a plein air session, because of a very photographic effect in the way that you have a very detailed foreground versus a very sketchy background, as you can see. And this is not at all the effect that you can see in other paintings of Bruno Liljefors. Look at the detail in the leaves. And this is actually not photographs. So here you can see some of the photographs that Bruno Liljefors created. And this one is not one of it. This is a ink, which is absolutely incredible. And look at the detail. Here we have one of the very rare examples of a pure landscape where you have no animals at all represented in it. So there are theories stating that this might maybe be a sketch that was produced beforehand as a study to add the animals in later on, but it is signed and it is finished, so we might never know. Look once again how incredibly textured this is. This has been produced with using a lot of media. to create this level of texture. I'm not sure that we can pick it up, but if I go to the side, you might see how loaded with paint the brush strokes were. This one was a wild card back in the days. The silhouettes of the birds are so abstract that this really was nearly abstract for the period. As you can see, there's barely any detail in the birds. You have quite a lot of detail in the grasses and the reflection in the water, but not the birds. There was a salon organized in Paris in 1913 for wildlife representations in art, and Liljefors was the only Swedish painter invited to have a stand there, and it was a personal triumph for him because many of other painters who were very appraised in Sweden at the time were not, in fact, invited to exhibit at this particular salon. Also, this is a painting that was acquired by the French president back in the time, Raymond Poincaré. What is a bit sad is that it is still part of the collection of the Musée d'Orsay, but it is not exhibited, so it sits usually somewhere in their archives. Now, from an artistic point of view, what is interesting here is that Bruno Liljefors was very interested in wildlife, of course, but also in the way that birds and animals lived. He was very interested in the way that they camouflage themselves within their environment. So he did a couple of paintings in a style where he explored this aspect of wildlife, where he actually had to actively look for the animal within the painting in order to find it. This particular painting was exhibited in 1886 and got extremely negative reviews. The critics of Liljefors' time has judged it to be very faded and described the scene that he chose to represent as vulgar, because this is how, I believe one has written something along the lines of, this is where the painter shows us how they get rid of rodents in his native land. Funny how time tends to rectify the errors in judgment, right? Because where's the critic? And where is this beautiful painting now exhibited? This is a really breathtaking painting that was exhibited at one of the Parisian salons in 1884, 86. I can't remember, but another really milestone moment for Liljefors, because his work has been accepted by the Parisian authorities, but surprisingly it didn't catch that much interest, apparently because it was hung too high. What I personally absolutely love about this is the way that he rendered the vibe and the atmosphere of a snowstorm, because look, it is funny, you can see some of the needles in the foreground distinctly, and some not at all, and not at all in the background, and all of the brush strokes with the white paint on it are leaning more or less in the same way. They are not straight through, but you know, they are going through diagonally. So rather than concentrating on painting the snow flakes individually, or how the different needles are covered in snow. You have a glazing going on here, glazing in white, that goes through in a very irregular way. So for instance, you have some areas that are more or less covered in white, some where the needles are peeking through more, because you really have this movement of snow, of a snowstorm coming in and blowing through the scene. And you can especially see it in the background where other birds are peeking through. Also look at the feathers. This is really incredible. How many details you can see here in this one, and then the smaller one flying away has more movement in it, so it's smudged. It's not painted as precisely. It's really ingenious is what it is. These two are very interesting ones, and make maybe up one of the most minimalistic paintings of his. You have the hair here in the snow with more or less surroundings. Here you have a bit more, and in this example a lot less. Once again, it's very interesting because although the subject is placed nearly perfectly in the middle of the painting, the way that there's really nothing there, most part of the painting is not classical approach. This is not what people are used to seeing back in Liljefors' time. The amount of negative space on this painting is really, really surprising. Also, what is interesting is his brush strokes after 1890 become a bit more loose, and he goes over to paint really big formats because this would allow him to paint more quickly and answer to higher demand, because this is around a time where he started to get really famous and getting a lot of commissions. This one honestly I love. By the sheer size of it, it feels so incredibly immersive. And also the colors that he chooses, those really muted greens and ochre colors that I personally so love, directly beam me to my hikes within the Fontainebleau forest near Paris. And I know this is not at all the same fauna, but it is really resemblant in this kind of very dry soil and mostly evergreen trees. Look how he manages to make the texture incredibly believable, incredibly realistic, but without going the photorealistic road. There is detail through the brush strokes and through the variation of colors, but not actually through the rendering of each grain and each fern. And this is really, really genius, I believe. This is what makes up the character and the livability of this painting. Another of a very few examples of landscape paintings by Bruno Liljefors that does not have any animals included, except for, if you want to count that, is a trace of an animal. Look, 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 look. Those little traces of little paws. Isn't that absolutely adorable? And not only adorable, but I mean, look at the different colors within the snow. There is beige, there is a cool tone blue, there is a more warm toned like turquoise, very light turquoise. There are traces of purple and maybe pink. There is definitely pink in here. It is stunning. It is absolutely unbelievably beautiful how complex this very simple composition looks. How full of color and life. This is another stunner and my very personal favorite. Actually, no, I have another personal favorite, but we are not allowed to take pictures or film the very particular painting, and I'm gutted because I would so love to show you. But this is a very close second. Look at him. It's incredible how much character he manages to give the animals in his paintings. And this is very loosely painted once again. As you can make out here in the middle ground within the trees. The paint is so thin that it is actually nearly at the stage of an underpainting. This is canvas that you see peeking through here, right? So it is very loosely painted, very thinly painted. Then there's a ton going on in the sky. This is where he layered all of the colors most of the time. Here you can see how the paint is much more saturated. I'm under the impression that I can't manage to get it on camera, but the sky is very cool too. It's like real ultramarine blue. And the part with the owl and the trees is painted maybe in burnt umber. So it has a real warm undertone in it. And it looks like the bird was painted facing a bonfire or something. It has so many reflex and so many warm colors were used in order to create him. Now we come to a part where, as you can see, the change in his artistic choices can be seen in a glimpse. We are coming to a phase of Bruno Liljefors' life where he started to paint seascapes and all focusing on birds that live at the seaside. And this is to do with some changes in his personal life because he divorced his first wife to marry her sister. And this was quite a scandal back in the days, of course. Him being quite famous at that point, so he had actually to move out of his original hometown and move to the archipelago of Stockholm, which showed a very stark difference, of course, in the landscape, in the flora, in the fauna. And again, the scale of it. These are easily 2 by 2 meter paintings most of the time. It is incredible how he painted the moving sea. You can see the effect of rain through the ripples on the surface of the water, and by contrast those parts that are very broken up and therefore smooth and more intense in color, more turquoise than ultramarine blue. And also you can see the effect of the rain dripping down through the clouds as well. It is as if your vision was impacted by the falling rain. I've done my duty by showing this to you, but I will not focus on it as intensely as on the first part of the exhibition because personally I'm not sure that this is the Bruno Liljefors that I prefer, through the very extravagant colors, and while this is extremely realistic because this is what the sea looks like in bright, stark sunlight, it is to my eye not as harmonious, not as peaceful, not as harmonious as his paintings of the forest. This one is incredible though. I absolutely am in awe of the way that he created life and a very dynamic feel in scenes that are so quiet and peaceful and still. Just look at how not only you can see the movement in the water, but also you get peaks of something that is happening underneath the waterline. Maybe algae or something that is moving under the water, and also how the reeds are following the flow of the water. It is It is incredible. Really, I lack for words to describe how absolutely stunning this is. Well, doesn't 225 start with a banger? This is a hell of an exhibition. It is really incredible. I also find that this is a very good idea to do something that is a bit out of the museum's comfort zone. It is not a painter that is extremely well known in Europe outside of Sweden, so it was a great initiative to make him better known to the general public. It is a great discovery for everyone who passes through here, I believe. The museography is great. It was a very pleasant experience on the whole. Were it not for one minor incident, and this is where I need you guys actually, because I've taken some time to record everything and do my commentary on the different artworks. There are very few people here, as you can probably see in the background, but I believe that it has been the exhibition where I've been harassed the most, of people coming up to me, telling me if I could shut up, telling me whether I could cease to film. I am allowed to talk. And I try to explain that I really believe in the power of sharing experiences and also knowledge, that I have a YouTube channel, that I try to share my knowledge of art, of painters, my experiences with people who for X, Y, Z reasons cannot experience the same thing, but it didn't move anybody. So yeah, it was really unpleasant at some point doing this out of a conviction, doing it to democratize art, and having to experience such mean behavior. It would really help me if at least you showed me that you care, that you appreciate what I'm doing here, if you want me to continue in any way, because this is starting to get this is starting to be a bumpy road. So I would like to get the feeling, or to know that what I'm doing here is not in vain, and that you guys care, and that you would like me to continue. So if you could consider dropping me a comment or like, or sharing this video, talking about my channel if you like and appreciate what I'm doing here, it would mean the world to me. Now, thank you so very much for coming with me to this exhibition, for watching my videos, and for being a part of our community here. As always, I hope to see you very soon in my next video. So have a lovely morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are right now. Cheers. Have a good one, guys.